Aaron, we're back.
We are, after a short boxing-induced hiatus.
Yes, yes. We all love boxing, but sometimes what it does to your facial features can make recording a video podcast a little less than ideal. So,
It was both. It was both
after a
of
little,
us at the
yep,
same time.
it's that's true. After a little healing, we are back and excited to be talking about this today. So, what we are talking about is essentially looking at the current way that money moves, payments are made, and looking at different opportunities to innovate those processes. And before we start to talk about how cool the new technology is and how bad, and we're not here to poo-poo on the way that are the payments processes are set up right now, or the way that money moves from point A to point B. We're here to talk about why it's hard today and where we can look at different technologies as ways to innovate and create better ways to move money from point A to point B. So, I'd like to start this conversation by really talking about why payments are hard today. Look at the way that things are set up, and that's where I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, man, payments are hard. It's harder than most people think to move money from where it is today to where they want it to be, in a legally compliant, safe, secure way. I mean, it's kind of tough to do. A lot of people assume it's like sending an email or, like it's the same as just handing someone cash at a grocery store. But the reality is there's a lot of complication, a lot of difficulty that gets abstracted away by fintech platforms and bank platforms today. And unfortunately, the acceleration or the speed of consumer demands and business innovation, like the pace at which people want payments to develop is much slower than how the technology and the kind of the base of payments actually turns out to develop. So it feels like we're always behind. There's always some friction there. And we're fintech is making a lot of progress, I think, in making it easier for people to pay. You can look at some great companies like Wise who have built these kinds of platforms to solve a specific problem. But it's hard to bring all of those different payment pieces into one ecosystem.
On that note, we look at whether it's P2P, domestic, or international payments. Ultimately, the inefficiency falls within settlement times, fees, and ultimately finality. If I need money to run my business, that delay in time is ultimately something that's really inefficient for the way that I can operate. So as we look to like different technologies and different ways that we can innovate, where do we naturally end up here?
I mean, you're leading me into my forte, in blockchain
Of
and,
course
and
I
in these
am.
kinds of things. Yeah. I mean, it's worth noting that I really got into using blockchain to move money as the first use case I was ever interested in. I was living in China and I was having a hell of a time trying to pay my student loans, like do things that were just normal payment activity, but I couldn't actually get the value from place A to place B. And that was something that really drew me into the blockchain tech. That's probably where I will start. But this is one where a lot of listeners probably thinking, "Hey, we've heard this before. We've heard that a blockchain is going to do this, or crypto is going to do this." I think my response to those kinds of challenges is this time it's different. I mean, now we're finally getting regulated financial institutions who are doing this. It's not just, a guy in a laptop and Telegram moving money around the globe. These are like financial institutions. These are payment networks, card networks. I mean, MasterCard, Visa, Swift, these are household names. Well, if you're in fintech, household names in payments. And they are all looking at various blockchain solutions. So yeah, I think that's a notable step forward in what's happening, and I think we're seeing a technology layer on the blockchain mature to the point where it's usable by large real financial institutions.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning now that I'm sure a lot of people have heard about FedNow as well, and how that will be released or available here coming soon. So what is FedNow? If you could give me a little elevator pitch on it.
FedNow is a payment system that the Federal Reserve is going to release into the market that in theory allows banks and financial institutions to move money through their account, through their ledger instantly. So it's kind of like an evolved version of a real-time payment. This level of real-time payment with a central bank technology is something that other countries have started doing already. So Brazil does this, India does this, Singapore has a similar one. So it's not, a brand new category, but of payments tech or of layer or whatever, but it is a new application of it for the United States. That's coming out, this summer in summer United States. And it's going to take a while to adopt. Right now, it's limited to domestic transfers only, and banks have to onboard into it and get it set up. So it's probably going to take a little while to take off, but it also has a big limitation in that it can't do international transfers. At least not yet. It might be a few years. It could be a while before that technology is enabled, but at some point, payments, the whole industry, the whole idea of doing anything fintech related is I want to be able to move money around faster. And we're seeing really interesting developments in fintech, in banking even, of this is something that consumers of this generation, of younger generations, this is a demand that they have, in the same way that an older generation innovated around credit cards, and that changed the way that financial relationships and that people had. I think moving toward faster payments, moving towards easier international payments, easier international commerce, these are trends that are not going to reverse. They're going to continue marching.
Yep. So for us fintech geeks, the technology behind getting money from point A to point B is really cool. But for a consumer or someone running a small business, it's not so much how it works. It's more of how can the money that I'm owed, or the money that someone's trying to pay me, or the money that I'm trying to pay someone, get out of this blockchain land and into my bank account, or somewhere where I can pick up cash to ultimately make it useful so that I can continue doing what I need to do if I'm a small business or a consumer, right? Just use the money, use my money. So how do you bridge that gap?
That's a good question. The answer is a number of years of working really hard on the problem is probably the answer for most companies. But, I like something, I wanted to, zoom in on something you said there. For consumers, payments are a pain point. They are a friction. If it could just happen for them automatically, they would love that. For businesses as well, right? Like, look, I want the money there now. I want it there yesterday. Let's just get on with the thing. And this is something that has been a pain point for a lot of different payment types, for a lot of different payment technologies. I'll go back to like the blockchain example, but setting up a private key, setting up your own wallet, doing all of these pieces is beyond what most people are comfortable doing. And I'd liken it to kind of the way that your average consumer doesn't know what Swift is, doesn't care what Swift is. All they know is they're going to, hit copy on a field and then paste it into the other apps that they can send the money. They don't know how to look at a Swift code and read it. Why would they? And I think that the trend for payments generally, and especially for blockchain-based remittances or cross-border payments using a blockchain, it's got to go the same direction. It's got to be just something they can plug into, press the button, and money comes out the other side. And so the way you bridge that gap is, good technology, good regulatory practices. Those are really key pieces of it, but also, making a good user experience, solving a problem, where the person has that payments friction, not sending them somewhere else to do the payment and then trying to bring them back. And that's one of the bigger trends we've seen in embedded finance and in the way that various fintech apps and payment apps have taken off is that, if you can make it easy to pay and you can solve some of these thornier technology or legacy technology issues, you can do pretty well in making those consumers have a happier journey, or those businesses have a happier journey.
Yeah, I'd say a great user experience can almost trick someone into not really understanding what's going on in the background, and I think that that's really the beauty of good financial technology.
Well, this is also, the core thesis around embedded finance generally is that you don't want to, you want finance and fintech and all of these things, you want the money to work for you right when you need it. Not before, not after, not separately, but you want to be like, yeah, right here, right now, in this app, in this experience with this brand is when I need this to occur. And I think fintech companies have caught on the most quickly to this, but non-financial brands are catching on to this as well. I'll give the experience or like the example that I think a lot of embedded finance people reach for, which is the way that payments happens in Uber. That's all Uber doing that. It's not like you go out to your bank account and settle an invoice to Uber on a daily basis or ride basis or monthly basis. It's just right there, right when you need it. And it makes it feel so much better and easier and more pleasant to use. The longer term thesis around embedded finance is that consumers and businesses want financial services when and where they need them right now in an existing flow. They don't want to have it completely separate and go somewhere else to move money and do payments and keep things going.
Yeah, that's a good example. I think almost everyone has paid for an Uber and realizes how seamless it is. But there's a lot that goes on in the background.
There's a lot.
There's a lot. So you mentioned a term a little earlier that I'd like to go back on, and that's payments ecosystems.
Yeah.
It's something that we talk a lot about at Alvier. I'm sure a lot of other fintech companies think about it and talk about it. So let's go down that road. What are payments ecosystems, and how can you build them and use them? Loaded question alert.
Look, the idea around a payments ecosystem is that you're not moving money in and out of lots of different financial institutions. You're keeping it fairly localized, fairly centralized with the people that you need to pay money to or get money from. You can use an example like, moving the money between an account without the money physically leaving that account or the bank having to do an additional transaction. It's really, what you'd think of when you think of the way that like I can pay people really seamlessly on Wise, right? Like that's a pretty good example of a peer-to-peer consumer kind of solution. And those kinds of solutions are now getting meshed together into broader business-to-business types of solutions. Like that gap is closing between, moving money between consumers and businesses. We have like gig workers that are somewhere in between an enterprise level and an individual consumer. But like you alluded to earlier, the idea is that it's moving money from A to B, and it could be a person to a person, it could be a company to a company. But the process of moving money from where it is now to where you need it is seamless, is smooth in that kind of ecosystem.
Yeah, so that sounds really simple, and it is, but I think we have to keep in mind that it's not just like we started this conversation with, payments are hard. And when you think about the complexities within a payments ecosystem, where does your head go?
Compliance, KYC, KYB, ensuring that money's in the right spot, compliance and security, right? Because in financial services, if you mess up, people lose faith in you, and companies don't want to mess up. So I think for me, it goes into, we made this API really easy to use or consume. We made this user interface that's really slick, whatever. But one of the first pieces that I go to is how to make sure that we're always doing things the right way, because that's important to have trust, to have confidence, to have people utilize that kind of ecosystem. I think this is, to like do the Alvier brag. This is why we're so focused on having like the money transmission licenses. This is something different than other embedded finance companies do, where they just get a bank to cover their obligations for them, and then like, well, it's not us, someone else's job. Whereas we're very hands-on in making sure that all of those requirements are being met. And I think that strategy is really paying off right now as banking regulators and financial regulators in the US are taking a close look at those third-party financial relationships and saying, hey, we want companies that follow the rules, do a really good job of following the rules, and are keeping customer assets safe. And so because we've always led with that, we feel great. And I think there's a couple of companies that are not feeling as great, feeling a bit of heat.
Yeah, I mean, I think you even see that with the news on how regulators are looking at FDIC insurance and and fintechs who claim to offer FDIC insured accounts, who's the sponsor, who's the bank sponsor behind that, and I guess consumer and business protection, how you have to make that pretty transparent to the end user of your product.
Yeah, and just knowing the answers to some of those questions when clients come in and ask us, how does this work? How should we think about it? Being able to guide them through that process rather than saying, you're going to have to ask somebody else. We don't do that part of this. That's like one of the hardest parts. And so it's cool if the technology works really well, but it's only, a business idea if the technology works and you're following the rules and making money off of it.
Yeah. You got to be prepared when the regulator comes knocking on the door.
Hey man, they're knocking already. I think it's gone
Yeah.
from a light tap to a pretty stern rap lately.
Yeah. Okay, so back to payments ecosystems. I think it'd be good to give the audience some practical applications. I mean, we talked about the technology behind it, how it works, the functionality, but um, give me some examples on whether it's a software company, a large enterprise, a fintech, who's best suited to I guess not only be an early adopter of a payments ecosystem, but see a lot of success within it.
So we are currently at Alvia working with customers who are, either a B2B kind of solution or a B2C kind of solution. So it depends on what kind of payment, who it's happening to, what the purpose of it. But I guess I'll start kind of on the B2C side. Um, we've seen a lot of telecommunications companies work on this. Like, we're working with Boost on their program. So I see a lot of telecommunications companies and also a lot of consumer-facing applications where people are looking for cross-border payments. So things like remittances or paying for a service in another country. People who are in the U.S. paying for something while they're overseas and making that kind of payment happen. So that's a consumer-facing application. The end user is a consumer. But there are also some really interesting use cases that we've enabled around the B2B payments ecosystems. And though,
Hmm.
we can talk about gig workers. Gig workers are a pretty interesting example. But, we can also look at the way that, say, a franchise would work domestically. And so we have seen franchises where there's like a large, parent company or a top co. They've got all their franchisees. And each franchisee is working with a different payment provider, is working with a different bank account. And so they're trying to spend 3 to 5 days sometimes moving the money for orders that they want to do from bank account A to bank account B, and then that goes to the top co to bank account C, and it can take a while. There's friction there. One of the solutions we enable is for that top co to, in essence, provide banking services to each one of their franchises right out of the box. And I think this is something that's important to franchises, especially because they want to be the full stack solution. They want to go in and say, look, here's your order management, here's your CRM, here's how things are going to be branded, here's what the menu looks like. Whatever it is, they want to give it to them as much in a box as possible. And so being able to offer financial services as part of that box for franchisees makes those franchises have a much easier time running those businesses. I'll give you like a really narrow case. If we had a franchise where they are doing kind of group ordering, like, economies of scale, they're going to go order for all of the franchises downstream of them, but they are waiting to try to collect the money for putting that purchase through. There's, some duration, some wait to get that money settled to the bank account, to get it onto the, to the supplier. That causes friction throughout the entire process. And one of the things that we enable in our B2B solution is the ability to essentially make that money transfer happen immediately. You can get it right from the bank account, get it into your account, go and send it out to even the vendor or the supplier directly, and it's like, boom, 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 done. Here's your report. It's not like, I'm going to check in, log in, see if it's working. All right, it went through. And then the cherry on top, I guess, is integrating all of that or embedding all of that into existing software applications. So existing CRM or existing like resource planning tools like ERP systems. That's something that, it's cool when it's a separate platform. I log in and it does all of it for me, but that's not embedded. That's just fintech. Where it's really, really, compelling from a business point of view is that it works into existing flows, existing software, existing ways of doing business. And so it's an upgrade to those systems rather than a rip out and replace.
Mm-hmm. It's a huge value add for those software tools too.
Yeah, and we have a pretty solid partnerships team that is working with some of the best in the business, and I think that's obviously important for the way that we do business. But it also makes sense from the end user or the end business point of view of like, hey, I'm using this thing right now to manage my payroll or to manage my my order system or whatever, and they've got a software tool, and we can work with those software tool makers, those software companies, to embed our solution directly into that experience. And that's what we were talking about before, is the end goal is not to have yet another payment channel or yet another payment app. That's not the end goal. The end goal is to make it so easy consumers and businesses barely know that they've moved money around the globe, and we want to abstract away as much of that pain and that complication as possible.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll be the first to say that sending someone money on Venmo is about as easy as it gets.
Yeah,
and that's I think that's the first itch in this innovation, and I'm excited.
But now imagine you had that same slick experience, but in every place you ever needed to pay somebody. Not like, hey, what's your handle on this app? Hey, oh, actually, I don't have that app. I got this other one. Oh, actually, can't you just use the whatever? And you get that going all the time. But imagine you had none of that, and it was just like the way that the person wanted to be paid, the way that you wanted to do the paying, was right there and was instant and it was fast. And it goes into existing stuff. That's really what it means to be embedded. It's not a separate, completely separate new flow. It's right where they need it when they want it.
Yeah. So we just dropped a lot on payments ecosystems. I think it's something that we haven't spoken a lot about in the past. So without going too much further into it, I think this is a good place for us to stop and maybe come back with a part two. Is there anything else that you want to leave the audience with before we finish up here?
I mean, I'm going to go back to talking about blockchain and crypto stuff because I love it.
Yeah.
I was reading that Swift is working on directly getting on the Ethereum blockchain, looking at the way that blockchain technology can be used in doing their payments. The Bank of International Settlements has been exploring ways that blockchains can help central banks settle FX claims. And now we've got JP Morgan doing dollar trades with banks in India using their private blockchain. I just want to reiterate those pieces of evidence for my thesis that this time is different. It's actually happening now. And I think the proof is people are moving money on this system now. So it's working.
Yeah. And I think what's really cool, from my perspective, someone who's not an expert, I think that when you remove, so I think people are very used to saying crypto and blockchain. They just think of them synonymously. But when you remove crypto from blockchain and you look at blockchain as a technology and look at the properties of it, I think that's when you start to see that moving money from point A to point B using the properties of blockchain technology. Nothing to do with Bitcoin, nothing to do with meme coins. It's fundamentally an innovation in the way that money moves. And it's really important for people to understand that, understand the difference and be open to looking at blockchain as just a superior technology.
Yeah, I mean, this is the meme though, right? Like when Bitcoin's price action is lackluster, everyone's in it for the technology. So it's fitting that we're talking about the technology. But hey, it's different. It's different this time. I believe
that's
it.
That's like the common Bitcoiner kind of saying, like, Bitcoin solves this, or blockchain.
Yeah, Bitcoin solves this. Yeah, blockchain solves this. No, the Bitcoin people don't say blockchain solves this. They definitely don't. No, they say Bitcoin, not blockchain. Yeah.
Bitcoin solves
this. Yeah, well, blockchain solves this maybe. I actually think, it's not blockchain solves this. It's blockchain plus working with regulators and building for years solves this. It takes a
Yeah.
lot of work to take a new technology and connect it up in a trustworthy way that makes consumers and businesses happier. So it's been coming for a long time, and I think it's happening.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thanks for the time, Aaron. I'm sure we'll be back talking about this, and there will be new updates, and there'll be more companies and governments trying to use this. And I'm excited to be talking about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about FedNow maybe next time. We'll see how it's going. We'll do a check-in on FedNow.
Yeah, we should.
We'll talk. Yeah, we'll talk about how it's going there.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, man. Part 2 or 3. Part 3 coming soon.